Good morning. Welcome to the Long Live Alternative Parties podcast. Free Press Media Press Inc., an alternative parties books publisher, sponsors this podcast. I'm Andrew Bouchard. Welcome to the Long Live Alternative Parties podcast.
Hi, how's it going?
It is going all right. How's it going with you?
Excellent. Thanks for
Friends,
having me here.
oh, we're glad to have you. Friends, we got someone who's going to present us a new idea, something I didn't hear about before, and she explained it to me a couple weeks ago. Her name is Sara Wolk, and she's with Equal Vote. So welcome, Sara.
Hi. Yeah, so I'm Sara. I'm the executive director for the Equal Vote Coalition, which is a national nonprofit focused on fighting for true equality in the vote itself. And that really relates back to vote splitting and two-party domination directly. So I think I have something relevant to share with you all.
Excellent. Go ahead.
So for starters, our current voting system, choose one only plurality voting, first past the post, is notoriously bad for not working if there's more than two candidates in the race. If you have two candidates only, you vote for your favorite. It's safe to vote your conscience. You get the right winner. But if there's more than two candidates, whichever faction or side ends up running more candidates or running similar candidates can have their voters end up split between those candidates. And it's classic divide and conquer, where a coalition or faction that should have won will end up losing, and the election can elect a winner who is opposed by the majority. So for single winner elections, that is awful. And luckily, it's completely solvable. So there's lots of alternative voting methods out there that allow voters to show support for multiple candidates. And that's really what we need. We need to be able to say, whether or not my favorite can win, I would prefer any of these people over my worst case scenario. So our proposal is called star voting. And the way star voting works is you score candidates from 0 up to 5 stars, like a 5-star rating. So that allows you to show 5 stars is my favorite, 4 stars is pretty good, 1 star is pretty my worst case scenario, who I would give a 0 to. And the 5-star ballot is really an upgrade. A lot of people are more familiar with ranked choice voting or a ranked ballot. And the real advantage here is that with a star ballot, you're able to show your preference order, but also your level of support. So we know, is your second choice as good as your favorite, almost as good, or terrible? And that's data that we really need to be able to find a good winner. So that's the first step of the recipe. You need a good ballot to get good ballot data to be able to find a good winner. The second piece of the puzzle is how you tally that. And star voting is counted in 2 rounds. It's actually an acronym: score, then automatic runoff. So the 2 highest scoring candidates overall are finalists, and your vote automatically goes to the finalist you preferred. So whichever finalist you had given a higher score to will get your full vote. Almost like a top 2 general election, except you don't have to vote again. Your ballot already shows your preferences. And that's how it works in a nutshell. So great data, great tabulation. That single runoff round allows you to find a winner who's majority preferred among all voters who had a preference, and really allows voters who maybe were in the minority to say, let's say I'm a third-party voter, and I don't really associate myself with like the majority. My favorites don't ever win. With star voting, you could say 0 stars for my worst case scenario, 1 star for the establishment frontrunner on my side, and then give 5 stars, 4 stars for my candidates that I really like. If it turns out none of my favorites can win with star voting, you're able to show that you preferred that lesser evil candidate without actually really giving them almost any support at all. So you get your cake and you get to eat it too. And the last thing there in terms of representation is that with that runoff round, even if my favorite can't win, my vote still made a difference and actually helped prevent my worst case scenario and helped pick a majority preferred candidate that is better, ideally. So your vote still makes a difference. It's still safe to vote your conscience.
That sounds good. Thanks for that overview. Now, kindly explain how this started. What was the origin of this star voting?
Yeah, that's a great question. And depending on how long of a story we want, we can go really far back. Alternative voting and like score voting, the idea that you're like scoring your candidates, goes all the way back to ancient times. But in around the year 2000, there was a study which showed that if you do score voting, like a 0 through 5-star ballot, and then you have a top 2 general election, that it got the most representative results compared to like dozens of other voting methods that had been proposed. So that was kind of a breakthrough moment just in terms of statistical analysis to say, wow, like there's lots of options. This one looks really promising. But it wasn't until 2014 that star voting itself was actually invented. So our organization, the Equal Vote Coalition, hosted a conference and had leaders in the field from a bunch of leading organizations. So Center for Election Science, Center for Range Voting, Fair Vote, Equal Vote, and lots of local organizations were all there. There were speakers. And following the presentations, it became really clear that there wasn't one proposal that really delivered on everyone's goals. There was kind of the ranked school of thought that was like, I really want to be able to safely vote my conscience and I want to prevent strategic voting. And then on the other side, there was the score voting or cardinal camp, like score voting, approval voting, people who were like, we want the system to not be biased, not play favorites, be accurate with lots of candidates in the race, and treat all voters equally. And obviously, both of those things are important. We don't want to be having a debate on whose priorities matter more. Ideally, we want one system that can do both. So following that, Mark Frohnmeyer and Clay Schentrop actually had a conversation where they realized, hey, a 5-star ballot actually shows not just the scores, but also the preference order. So what if we did a combination of the two things, count the first round as a score ballot and count the second round as a preference ballot? Would we get something that's more than the sum of its parts? And it turned out that we did. Yeah, so in 2017, star voting was included in a study done by Harvard statistician and Center for Election Science Vice Chair Jameson Quinn. And that study showed that star voting really topped the charts in terms of both strategic resilience and representative accuracy. And that's kind of how the movement, took off.
Did you tell me that a way to think of star voting is like online Yelp or Google reviews where you have 5 options? You can give 1 star, 2 star, 3 star, 4 star, 5 star. And instead of doing that to restaurants or businesses, you're doing it to candidates. Would you say that's a fair summary of this type of voting?
Yeah, from the voter perspective, that's the exact same thing. There's also 0 stars for no support. And yeah, so that's one of the things about it. For voting, we really do need a voter interface that's super familiar and that isn't going to like lose people as they're trying to like learn a new system or be overwhelming. but the 5-star rating is so ubiquitous. Everyone's done it all over the world before. And the only difference with using it for voting is that you're rating multiple things and comparing them. So really, anyone who's ever done a 5-star rating, anyone who's ever done a survey, anyone who's ever done standardized testing, that user interface is the same. And it's the same to count it as those things as well, just simple addition.
Okay. So kindly compare and contrast it with ranked choice voting and traditional voting and any other forms of voting.
Okay. Yeah, so in a nutshell, me personally, when I first heard about voting reform, the first voting method that I heard about was ranked choice voting. And the pitch that I got from a canvasser on the street was ranked choice voting. You rank the candidates. If your first choice is eliminated, your next choice is counted. That continues in rounds until you have a majority winner. And that is kind of true, but kind of glosses over some really important details. So one of the problems with ranked choice voting is that it doesn't count all of the rankings. And so depending on the order of elimination, your next choice might not be counted. So for example, let's say my first choice isn't strong enough to win, but they are like a strong competitive contender. So they hang out through rounds of elimination. They're still in the running. And then in the last round, my favorite is eliminated. If that happens to me as a voter, my second choice will never be counted. The rest of my rankings might not have existed. And it may have turned out that if you had counted all those rankings, there was a better, more majority preferred winner. So with ranked choice, I think there are a number of problems, but voting honestly, like honestly ranking your first choice can backfire. And it can backfire in very confusing and non-transparent ways. So it's really hard for voters to kind of navigate the impacts of that and vote effectively so that their vote can't get wasted. And then another issue there is that it's been really oversold. So historically, ranked choice has been around for a long time. I think it was the best option for a while, or one of the better options. But the talking points that I first heard were it's safe to vote your conscience, which, like I just explained, isn't actually totally true all the time. It doesn't waste your vote, also not true all the time. And then the third was that it accurately elects the best, most representative winner. And in terms of representative accuracy, picking the right winner, ranked choice voting, specifically the instant runoff voting version that's used all over the place. That system, when you test like how often does it get the right winner, it does a great job. Again, if there's only 2 candidates, like our current system, it does a great job if all the 3rd, 4th, 5th candidates are completely non-viable and are just going to be eliminated right away. So ranked choice is good enough to have solved the kind of Ralph Nader scenario that happened, or the Ross Perot scenario that happened. Both of those ended up throwing presidential elections to the wrong winner. And ranked choice would have prevented that. But if you have 3 or more viable candidates, or it's not clear who the front runners are, that's when ranked choice can fail. And if we want to have a competitive political space where we have multiple viable candidates, multiple viable parties, we really need a voting method that works in that context. So that's where star voting comes in. And just as a little asterisk, there are other ways to tally a ranked ballot that do count all the data, and those are better, but those aren't the systems that are being proposed by in the political space. So in practice, if you hear ranked choice voting, they mean a specific thing that's not the best.
Okay, I remember when you were telling me about this, you mentioned the issue of decentralization.
Yeah.
So kindly explain the benefits of your type of voting with decentralization.
Sure. So the voting method itself is just one piece of the puzzle in terms of electoral reform. There's a lot of problems that need to be solved, and we need a solution that is able to solve, that's compatible with all these other movements as well. So star voting is really compatible with election security and decentralization, election integrity concerns. And the reason for that is that the ballot is tabulated with addition and all the ballot data is counted. So our current system is also counted with addition, and that means that we're able to cast our ballots. They can start counting the votes as they come in. They can report preliminary results. They can report results by precinct. And that's a really important thing in terms of election security, because that's a huge fail-safe against voter fraud. But ranked choice voting in particular doesn't allow that because they're not counting all the data. You don't know which data is relevant until you compile all the ballots in one central location. And until you get all the ballots in, you can't do the elimination rounds of tabulation. So, so that's another reason why ranked choice voting, you know, though it looks good at first glance, has some major issues in terms of implementation details. So star voting, because it is counted with addition, both for the scoring round and just adding up the votes in the runoff round, means that you can count it at the local level. You can report preliminary results. You can report precinct level results, and you can do that data analysis as well later to say, you know, how did, you know, my county vote? How did my state vote? How did my city vote? How did this subset of voters vote? So yeah, that's the thing called precinct summability. And it's, I think, a really fundamental piece of the puzzle, because even with a perfect voting method, if we can't prove that our elections are secure, then we won't have faith in the voting method. So whether or not you think voting fraud is likely or is real or is pervasive, it's important that voters have that transparency and trust in the mechanism, because, you know, if people don't trust the system, then the government doesn't have any, you know, leg to stand on.
Sounds good. So kindly tell me about what you mentioned to me on the phone about the ease of implementation, specifically as to the software issue, as you were telling me that some forms of voting require software changes. How is that with your type of voting?
Yeah, that's pretty much the same answer as the previous question. Ranked choice voting, again, because they're not counting all the data, because they're counting preferences and tournament style rounds, requires, in most cases, all new voting machines and proprietary hardware, proprietary software. A lot of that, you know, may or may not be open sourced. But with star voting, our current voting method, our current voting hardware, voting machines and voting scanners and tabulators, all of that already knows how to add up votes, and adding up scores is the same thing fundamentally. So all that would be required is just a software upgrade so that the machines can recognize a different ballot format. And then once you have that software upgrade, there's a recertification as well that's part of the process. So very attainable in terms of implementation cost. that is a one-time cost, and it's really actually a one-time cost per election vendor. It's not something that every single jurisdiction will ever have to pay for. And it's a cost that is really a drop in the bucket compared to the cost savings that star voting unlocks, particularly because with a one-round voting method, in a lot of cases, there's no need for a primary. So skipping the primary altogether, having an inclusive, accurate representative general election means that election officials only have to do half the work. And it also means that candidates only have to raise half the money. They only have to run one campaign instead of a primary and a general in a lot of cases. Sometimes we need a primary, but where we don't need one, especially at the local level, primary elections are often really low turnout. People aren't paying a lot of attention, and you don't get great results for those reasons anyway.
Kindly speak about the opposition and or reception you received to this type of voting.
Yeah. In terms of the general population, I think we're really at a watershed moment historically, where people really recognize how broken the system is, politics, the two-party system, all of the above, and how polarized it is. And so a quick, simple conversation of, yes, these problems are valid, and yes, they are solvable, and here's this like pretty simple, like mechanical thing we can upgrade that would have a huge impact on all of that, people get really excited. So for lay voters, the reception's been really great, I would say. For people who are more involved, more engaged, like I said, even I had heard of ranked choice voting first. And so my own response was like, hey, we really need to solve this problem. We don't have time to mess around. If we have a solution that's good enough, why are you coming in with another proposal? And so we do get a lot of people like that who are, asking the hard questions. Why are you doing this? Why are you in this space? We were here first. And I think the answer is that voting reform is so important, and getting it right is so important. If we had a proposal that was good enough previously, we would have solved this problem 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 150 years ago when ranked choice was first invented. But we haven't. And at that point, rather than shutting down people who oppose your proposal, sometimes it's worth it to actually invite people to the table, listen to their criticisms, address them if they're valid, and then come forward with a new proposal that really delivers. And I think that's what star voting does.
Kindly tell us about your organization, Equal Vote. How did it get started, and what, other than this, what your organization does?
Sure. So our organization's the Equal Vote Coalition, and our mission is to fight for true equality in the vote itself. What that means is ensuring that every voter has an equally weighted vote. And that's something that's fundamental for eliminating vote splitting and ensuring that if I have more candidates on my side or not, my vote is just as powerful as yours. Our mandate is voter education. So really getting people up to speed and educated about this issue, about the problems, about the options, and about the solution. The second piece of the puzzle is research. So we do a lot of research and engage with people at a high level in the electoral science field to further these discussions and do new research. We actually just submitted a paper today for peer review, so that's super exciting. And the third piece of the puzzle is community organizing and coalition building. So we have volunteers, we've got a Slack space, we've got local chapters, all over the country, and we're really trying to engage people and also engage other organizations where, that have overlapping values and overlapping mission, and build a movement that actually has the power to get things done. So for people who are listening, if you want to get involved, go to equal.vote, our website, and then click that sign up link. You can volunteer, you can join the group so that you can just chime into conversations if you want. There's a lot of different ways that you can get involved, make a difference, and help, either remotely or showing up in person.
So they go to equal.vote.
Right. And then we also have a sister project, the Star Voting Action Project. And that is really focused on actually getting star voting implemented in the real political space. So that's the branch of the project that's focused on ballot initiatives, charter reviews, legislative bills, and all of that. And then actually also private sector implementation too. So if your business, your workplace, your school, your nonprofit is looking for a better way to make decisions, definitely reach out to us and we can help you get set up to do that. Either for like simple online polls, credentialed secure online voting, or in-person, government standard secure paper ballot elections.
And for that Star Voting Project, that's at the same website as Equal Vote?
It is linked, so you can find it from there, but the website for that is starvoting.us.
Okay, starvoting.us. All right, Sarah, thank you for coming on the program today and giving us an overview of star voting. We appreciate you giving us a new option for voting reform.
Yeah, and thank you so much for the work that you do fighting two-party domination. I think it's a massive problem. If we're going to get any of these massive problems that we're facing solved, this is kind of a keystone reform that would unlock our ability to be effective on every other issue. So appreciate you.
Thank you very much. That's nice of you to say.
Yeah.
Sarah, all the best to you and your organization. May you continue to make a difference.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
You too. Bye now.